One of the things I wanted to talk about was the difference between live and online poker. I'll give you kind of what I was thinking and why this came up, but and then you can kind of tell me what you think. So over the past like 3 or 4 years, I've played in a handful of live games, a couple weekly games that are exclusively live poker, and online, not quite as much. So for quite some time, early on, I used to like it was ingrained in me, like, oh, if you're successful in online poker, that's going to translate one for one into live poker. You're going to if you're a master online, you're going to be a master live, and that's all there is to it. And you couldn't tell me otherwise. And I would say over the last 3 or 4 years, my feelings on that have kind of waned a little bit. And I'm sort of, I don't know, because I've played more live poker, I think I'm sort of a little bit more reflective on the possibility or open to the idea that there are certain aspects or nuances of live poker that would make some people significantly more successful at it, even at the highest stakes levels, than there are with an online wizard. And in saying that, I think that I still think it's definitely possible and easy to go from online to live in some aspects. You're not going to be horrible at one and great at the other. That's rare. But I think that I've started to come around to the idea that there is more nuance in live poker, and that some of the things that may have been poo-pooed by a lot of the online guys, or from a long time ago, that they may have some merit, more than I had given it credit in the last few years. So, what do you think about basically the differences between live and online, and has your mind changed about the two as you've gotten older?
A lot of thoughts come up. I'll probably forget some of them as
Sure.
before I say them. But so firstly, when we started playing poker, um, poker online was a lot different than it is today. And I think one key difference between 15 years ago and today is that now to succeed at online poker, there's much less exploiting. There's much less extreme exploiting than there was 15 years ago. 15 years ago, you had players who, like, I mean, people don't like believe this, but there were like literally regulars in the party poker 10 20 5 10 games who once they opened to three big blinds, they were calling any raise up to 30 big blinds, and then with any pair you got their whole stack. Like, there were extreme whales, and those, every once in a while those show up. But it used to be the case that a lot of skill online was taking advantage of players like that, and nowadays it's very little. Obviously there are weaker players and you need to adjust to them, but the adjustments are less extreme. And so I think to succeed online today, you do have to have a much more solid fundamental understanding of the game and game plan and approach. And when you play live, especially if you're talking similar stakes, it there are more extreme exploits to be had. And so there are people who do well online but don't think to make those extreme exploits, or maybe wouldn't be good at them. And then there are people who play live who are great at those kind of extreme exploits, who would not win online because those opportunities aren't there and their fundamentals aren't good enough. So I think that aspect of live versus online has changed over the years. So I think it used to be the case, like, yeah, I think the actual fundamental skill sets have more of a difference in terms of just the softness of the game, because the softness of the game has changed. I think that my feeling on live tells is that they are potentially extremely powerful if you're playing against very weak players and you're decent at reading live tells, or you're playing against, higher level players and you're extremely good, like, top 10th of a percentile at
Sure.
reading live tells. I think most Like I don't consider myself like I consider myself good enough to against amateurs pick up on live tells
Sure. Yeah.
that are pretty reliable. But against strong players, I don't. And it's not that I don't see anything or have guesses, but there's so much noise. It's just impossible to really like to get a reliable read on somebody. For me, at least, I have to play with them for so long before
Sure.
I have any kind of confidence in anything. So I think that live tells are a real, potentially very powerful thing that over 99% of players are not like are not really getting much value from because it's just there's so much. I mean, there's so much information. Like people, back in the day, you talk about like online bet sizing tells or timing tells, but like that's all you have. And so it's actually in some ways easier to focus on things like that than like live. You have I mean, you have their hands, you
Or
have their
yeah.
face, you have anything they say, you have the time they take, you have the
Did
sizing they
it did
bet,
a
you have how
drink
they put
just
the chips in.
arrive? Did
Yeah, like
Yeah.
there's so much noise um, that you can if you're able to observe all of those things, you still don't like really know which meant something until I don't know. Maybe I haven't put enough hours in to live poker, and maybe there are patterns that things are more universal. But for the most part, my understanding of tells um, is that they're mostly pretty. Uh, what's the word? I mean, they're mostly pretty unique to the person, and so you
For
need
sure.
to evaluate that person and figure out what their tells are after a while. It's not just like, oh, he scratched his head. When people scratch their head, they're weak. There are some things like that, but they're not super reliable, especially if you're not playing against amateurs. So my feeling is that, yeah, there's a lot of difference and there's a lot of opportunity in live poker from the tells perspective, but it's just really hard to pick up on. But then I do think because like making huge exploits is a huge part of the EV of live poker, and it's less so part of the EV online poker. I do think it's a different skill set, kind of.
So I guess to that end, I would say, when you're playing online, you have, if especially if you're using some sort of tracker, you have stats that are going to be available to you, and a total number of hands that are going to make them relevant stats. So something like your opponent's turn check raise range, or something that's a little bit esoteric that you might have a hard time tracking in a live game.
Yeah.
Especially, or like a river bluff check raise that's going to come up once a session or twice a session, if you're playing live mixed game, something like that. But if you're playing online, you might get, I don't know, 8, 20 times, even if you're playing multiple tables, 80 times the number of hands that you're getting in a live game. So those stats become a little bit more reliable. If you are a master of, let's say, GTO principles, um, is it going to be, I guess, easy, not easy, but possible to apply those in a live game setting when you don't have these frequencies that you would have online from your opponent? Say, I guess you wouldn't be able to exploit them, but you can um, maintain your own frequencies in that sense.
Yeah, so you can still play close to optimally or as close as you're capable of,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's just much different information. And I think that there are a lot of players who are very reliant on HUDs, and I don't say that I don't mean that as a negative,
sure.
but
Yeah,
that's a skill
it's just how it goes.
set. Yeah, it's a skill set that some people have gotten very good at, and you can't do that live because even like you just don't get that many hands against people, and you aren't keeping perfect track of their actions. So it's just hard to develop those kind of reads. And your reads really have to come more from showdowns,
Sure.
I think, almost entirely, and like making general like stereotyping people and
Actually,
like trying
Kevin
to
Rabichow, when we talked, said that exact same thing. He said,
Mhm.
if you're playing live, you shouldn't be making virtually any, drawing any conclusions from any hand that isn't shown down. He
Yeah,
said somebody three bets you 4 straight times. The overwhelming majority is they just received at least three great hands. You know,
yeah, yep,
so um,
yeah,
so yeah, it
couldn't
sounds
agree
like you
more.
agree with that.